Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to the Criterion Collection review series, and today we're going to be reviewing another Kurosawa film. It's not the last one, but we're getting there. This film is actually very important to Kurosawa's overall career. It sort of was the beginning of the late stage in his filmography, and sort of his return to form after a decade of not producing or making any films. Where the production history is just as fascinating as the film itself, which that movie is Kagemusha, which is number 267 in the collection. Now the title Kagemusha is actually very integral to the film. It's in Japanese, it stands for the Shadow Warrior. The film itself is about shadows and doubles, where it takes place in the late 1500s of feudal Japan. I want to say 1575 is when it starts, somewhere in around that range. There are multiple warring clans. The clan we follow is the Shingen clan, which is, there's one guy at the head of the clan, his name is Shingen, and his brother serves as his double whenever they go out into combat. They decide that they need a third double, which is actually a petty thief that they save from being executed, or in this case, crucified. Where this petty thief also looks exactly like Shingen. They decide to have him sort of in the back wings in case something goes wrong. Where Shingen has this plan, where I believe he wants to take over Kyoto. I want to say it is. But he wants to do it within 4 years. And he says that if he dies or something happens before he can take it over, to not stop until they can, to make sure they can actually do this job. And so, on one of the nights during one of their raids into Kyoto, a sniper manages to kill Shingen. He's wounded and dies out of the sight of most of the other members of the clan, and the leaders of the other smaller armies are the only ones to know that Shingen is dead. So the brother brings forth the petty thief and says, all right, this is going to be our new Shingen. He will be taking over the role and will be portraying Shingen until further notice. So this petty thief must now inhabit the role of a leader of a clan, and he must actually inhabit the role of Shingen himself, being a very larger-than-life character that meant a lot and represented a lot for the clan. So right off the bat, it's important to note how gorgeous this movie looks. As I stated in the beginning, this is Kurosawa's first movie in 10 years. The last movie he made was in the late 60s. And then he made this movie. This movie was released in 1980. And in that time, while he was having difficulty getting the film financed and trying to find his next project, his form of therapy was to paint scenes from the film, essentially creating storyboards. And his work on that is absolutely spectacular. And one of my favorite things about this release from Criterion is that the booklet comes with this artwork. Where it's sort of set up like this, where you see his different artwork and can compare it to the film itself. It's simply beautiful stuff. And the fact that, it's the 80s now, or it's the late 70s when they started shooting, so Technicolor is more easily available. And I don't know if this was his first color film, but I think it's the one that he's most well known for shooting in color. Because he takes full advantage of that technology. The colors in this film simply pop. There is some gorgeous cinematography and gorgeous moments involving maybe like blood or just the scenery and the nature. One of my favorite details in the film is how all of the separate armies or different divisions of the whole army represent different elements. So there's fire, forest, water, and mountain. And they all are specific colors, so the fire regiment is red, forest is green, water's blue, you get it. You can always tell which army you're following or which military group you're seeing because of the color of their armor. There's a really great sequence near the beginning where a messenger is running through is running through a castle area where Shingen's military is set up, and you see all the different, he runs past all the different groups with their different colors as they all are sort of resting, and as he runs by, they all kind of get up at the same time to look at him. It's a very striking image. And I will say this is something that Kurosawa continues from his earlier career in Kagemusha, which is capturing scale. Kurosawa has always been really great at utilizing large groups of people and large areas to convey big emotions. And Kagemusha is probably the prime example of that. With the amount of money he has hundreds and hundreds of extras portraying the army, and just these wide open spaces that he's able to portray. It's truly a grand epic scale film that is awe-inspiring. It's a beautiful looking film that is just on such a grand scale, and it is a nearly 3-hour movie. It's almost 3 hours on the dot. It's a few seconds above 3 hours. But it's a testament not only to the film's cinematography, but to Kurosawa as a storyteller and a filmmaker, that with the pacing, it never feels like 3 hours. I only checked the time maybe 2 times throughout this viewing. The first time I was an hour and a half in. The second time I had maybe 15 minutes left in the movie. And it feels like it flies by. And I think it's because Kagemusha has such a great initial premise, right? Where you have this man, this shadow of a leader who has to inhabit everything about him and try to like convince the rest of the clan beyond the higher ups that he is still this guy hasn't died. And that leads, I think, fairly nicely into sort of the themes of the film and what it's trying to say, where I feel like Kurosawa is arguing for the power of symbols and the power of ideas and how they can exist after someone's death and how they can be used to lead and inspire people. Where Shingen was considered the mountain, he was considered this leader that would never back down, that would always, stare death in the face. And in the last hour of the film, Shingen has to, or the petty thief, has to look over a battle. And he has to, present himself as Shingen, as this mountain. And in the beginning, he's very scared, rightfully so, being right there, barely guarded. It's very terrifying. And so when the other army tries to do a raid, he freaks out a little bit, moves, he wavers essentially, and the bodyguards have to defend him, and a lot of them get killed. He realizes that if he gives up on this ideal, if he can't represent it, it will be death for the clan and for these individuals that are so committed to the idea that they will die for it, so committed to this person and the concept of him, they will die for it. So then when the second raid party shows up, he stands his ground. He only sits and stares at them, and they're so intimidated because they know the legends of Shingen that they run off, they leave, and I think that that is the ultimate message or idea of the film, is the power of ideas and concepts and how they outlive people. And I also am really fascinated by this motif, or this concept of like a shadow or a doppelganger, where in the opening shot you have 3 people, where you have Shingen, and then beside him on a slightly lower level is his brother, and then in the corner closer to the camera you have the petty thief, and by the petty thief is a candle that projects like a shadow of Shingen. And I think it's this beautiful image that perfectly encapsulates the relationships between these characters, and starts the idea or the motif of a shadow, and how a shadow only exists when the body of a person exists, right? When you get rid of that, the shadow is gone. So in a sense, the petty thief is a shadow of Shingen. And as long as the clan believes Shingen is alive, then he is alive in a sense. This shadow can represent him. It can represent those ideals and that very concept that Shingen embodies. And I just think it's such a fascinating way of exploring that on such a grand scale. And I mean, just the inner politics of this feudal system and all these warring clans is interesting on its own. But to add this whole other, doppelganger shadow aspect to it, this whole idea of concepts and ideas representing individuals and how powerful and inspiring that can be, I think it really elevates Kagemusha from a good movie to a great movie, which is something Kurosawa really specializes in, is taking really great ideas and a great premise and then really expanding on it, making it more complex, and finding what makes it interesting and worth exploring. Which, I mean, why he's a master, and this film is no exception to that. I'd be remiss to not mention how great the performances are, especially from the three people, the three main characters, Shingen, his brother, and the petty thief. While they all do look alike, you can tell who each person is simply by the way they perform and the way they act. And the way the petty thief can start as very like bumbling, very Toshiro Mifune-esque. It's not him, but you know, it's similar goofiness about him, is similar like casualness, I guess. But then by the end, once he's fully embraced the Shingen personality, once he's fully embodied him, he does change. And then when he has to question that, or his legitimacy is questioned, that's when he returns and reverts back to his original petty thief self. And it's an amazingly well done performance. I think it's simply fantastic. But of course, this is a Criterion, so it comes with a lot of great special features. A lot of the special features deal with the production history of the film, which is just as fascinating as the movie itself. Where again, Kurosawa spent 10 years trying to get the film funded. He was seen as sort of a Kubrick-esque perfectionist who was difficult to work with, would go over budget, over schedule, and no one really wanted to take a risk on him. So he was very depressed, and you know, his form of therapy was developing this movie. And it actually got made because Francis Ford Coppola and George Lucas, who in the late 1970s were on top of the world and probably the most powerful people in Hollywood, they were able to convince Fox to provide the rest of the funding the movie needed, and to also lock down the foreign distribution rights. And so because of that, they have a really great interview with Francis Ford Coppola and George Lucas that you see not only how Kurosawa inspired them, but how they came to provide funding for the film, and sort of how they feel about the movie now that it's out and they've seen it. You know, it's a very interesting, great documentary about the production of the movie, which comes with every Kurosawa film, honestly. There is one of the more interesting aspects of this release is they have this sort of special feature where they took the storyboards that Kurosawa painted and they set them to the audio of the film. Of course, it is a condensed version of the movie. I think it's like 40 minutes or so. But it's really fascinating to see how closely he captured on canvas what he wanted to on film. And it's a really interesting special feature that I think is really, really well done. And then also Kurosawa, you know, having to make ends meet, he made, during the production of Kagemusha, he directed some whiskey commercials for a Japanese whiskey, and shot them on the sets of Kagemusha. And so those are included. I haven't had a chance to watch those, but they're here if you want them. And then of course, last but not least, we have the booklet, which again is gorgeous, and includes a great essay about the production and about like the history of Kurosawa at this time and what he was going through. The essay is written by Peter Grilli, a great read. And then there's a really insightful and really fascinating interview between Kurosawa and Tony Raines, who published the interview in Sight and Sound in 1981, where we get a look into how he felt about the situation and how he feels about the film and about the Japanese film industry in general. In terms of Kurosawa films, this is up there. I don't know if it's on the same echelon as like a Seven Samurai or a High and Low. I don't know if I necessarily care too much about the characters. I don't know if they're fully fleshed out. It's more the concepts and the visuals that really drive me to love this film. But I think it is worth seeing. It's worth owning. It's a Kurosawa feudal Japan epic film, so it's going to be amazing. But I think this release itself is what makes it so special, and what I hope for every Criterion release to be. Because it not only gives you more behind the scenes of the film, but the context in which it was made, where Kurosawa was at, where the Japanese film industry was, you know, why did Coppola and George Lucas have to be the ones to fund it? And then including the paintings and the storyboards, just, you know, it's a release that truly feels like a lot of love and care was put into it. And I think that's all you can hope for with the Criterion releases, it feels like a lot of genuine love and care went into it. But yes, that's Kagemusha. What do you all think? Do you like this film? Do you love Kurosawa? What are some of your favorite films by him? Let me know in the comments. If you like this video, please like it. If you want more people to see it, please share it. And please subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Next time, we're going to be returning to the French New Wave and talking about the first Francois Truffaut film in my collection. One of the first films of his I saw, I believe. And that's going to be Jules and Jim. But either way, thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.